everyone and welcome back. Now this week I'm going to be talking to you about all things food. I know, one of my favourite subjects. So in today's video, I am going to be talking to you through 4 of the paid for dining experiences I had while on my time on the Azura with P&O Cruises whilst going around the Canary Islands in February 2023. Now do bear in mind that a lot of these restaurants actually do feature on several of the P&O cruise ships. So I am accounting for my personal experience on the Azura, how I felt in terms of the environment, my overall experience and the food that I had in those restaurants. Now I'm going to caveat this video by saying I could not recommend enough going for a slight upgrade with these restaurants. Yes, your food is included when you board the P&O cruise ships. However, paying that little bit extra really made the difference to our holiday, and I am so glad that 4 of the evenings we spent on the ship were in these restaurants because it really did make the holiday. In this video I'm going to be reviewing for you the Beach House, the Glass House, the Epicurean and Sindhu, so I will leave timings below if you want to skip to a specific restaurant. Now I'm actually going to start with the Beach House. Now this interestingly was my least favourite of the 4 that we paid for. So in this you can expect tacos, you can expect fajitas, honey glazed chicken, and they have all sorts for pudding as well. Now this is my kind of food. Was disappointed in this restaurant. That said, this meal only cost us £10 per person, so it wasn't exactly like it was big bucks that we were spending on it. So in this restaurant you pay a cover charge for the table, and as I said, that is £10 per person. That does differ, I believe, depending on which cruise you're on and the length of your cruise, but in our experience it was £10 per person. Now there were some meals that you would still have to pay a little bit extra for, so depending on what you went for you may end up paying more. It's also worth saying this didn't include drinks. Now when we went in, I didn't really love the vibe of the restaurant, I'm going to be honest. It felt a bit dated. It had this very kind of deep red, very patterned carpet. Nothing wrong with it. That combined with the table arrangements, there were lots of booths, and the tables for 2 were very small, and it just all felt a bit tired and a bit dated. Now this, as I said, is on the Azura, so it could be different if you go to other restaurants. So didn't love the general environment of the restaurant. The food itself I felt was actually a bit bland. So my experience, we shared some nachos. I will say the portion size was amazing, and they brought out this huge bowl. I'm so glad that we ordered it for the 2 of us because we would not have been able to have one of those each. So this huge bowl of nachos, they were okay. They were nachos, you can't really go wrong, but they were just plain tortilla chips, and then you had the accompaniments, the sauces and stuff to dip in, rather than them coming out, you know, on a skillet or something like that. Sometimes you get that with nachos, they come out with the salsa and the cheese already on. It was okay, it was a bit bland. I had tacos for my main, so I had a trio of tacos. There was a chicken, there was a beef, and there was a jackfruit, which was a whole new experience for me. I've never had a jackfruit, didn't love it, but that was just me. It wasn't that it was cooked badly or anything like that. But again, it was just okay. I will say though, the portion sizes are huge because we didn't have room for a pudding. We were both so full, we didn't want any more. Arguably, we didn't make the most of our money there because it wouldn't have cost us any extra to have a pudding, providing we didn't go for one of the subsidy puddings, but we just didn't really feel like it. And it was deserted in there. I would say, again, it might be different for different people's experiences, but we did absolutely not need to book for that restaurant. It was dead in there. We were on a kind of 8 o'clock sitting at that point, and there was us and maybe 3 other tables, which also didn't help with that environment. There wasn't a nice buzz in the restaurant or anything, and it just, yeah, didn't love it. But you know, I'm glad we did it because the menu itself sounded exactly like my kind of thing, and I would have been sad if we hadn't tried it. Okay, next up is the Glass House. Whew. I think this is one of the best steakhouses I have ever been to. Now I would say, in terms of the environment of the restaurant, felt a bit like a cafe. It was again quite dated. I will add, the Azura is one of the older P&O ships. I think it's about 10 years or so old now. So, you know, these things are going to age over time. But you were sat almost on like kind of armchairs with a small table between you, and you were almost out in the corridor, the way it's structured in the Azura. You've got a few tables and then a rope barrier rather than a wall, a rope barrier, and then you're right next to where the shops are, which in some ways, because we were quite late dining at the Glass House because it was so hard to get a booking, so we were right at the end, so it did empty out in the restaurant. It still felt like there was movement and people around. There are parts of this restaurant which are just stunning. Like, there was a big bar in the middle with cases of wine, and it was just so beautifully done. It was really, really nice bar, I would say, and you can sit and have a drink there if you so choose. Now with this restaurant, you pay per meal that you have. So unlike the beach house, it's not a flat fee. You pay depending on what you go for. Now I've got it written down, but the prices varied from about £2.75 for a starter, £8 for a main, and £4.50 for dessert. And everything I had was delicious. Had a trio of starters to begin, and there was a bit of everything. I had prawns, and it was just, oh, it was so tasty, and I liked having 3 small things to try. It was all so delicious. And then a steak for £8. I mean, come on. So this beautifully done steak. I'm very fussy when it comes to how my steak is cooked. I like it rare. People quite often overdo it, but it was done perfectly, with, you know, you had roasted tomato, you had a whole roasted garlic as well, chips. Oh, my mouth's watering just thinking about it. And the weakest, I'd say the weakest of the 3 courses was the pudding. Again, we were so full by this point, but we were having a pudding. So it was a trio of puddings again, and we shared that between the 2 of us. And it was nice to have a little bit of each. The puddings were not as good, but they were still tasty. I think where we just had this exceptional meal experience the whole way through, the pudding was not so great. But I couldn't, if you enjoy a steak, you must go to the Glass House. It was just wonderful. It was so great. It was where we spent our formal night. Upon reflection, I don't think I would choose to go to the Glass House for the formal night in the future. I'd go somewhere like the Epicurean because it's a bit more fancy, a bit more dressed up. But I'm really glad we went, and I think it's going to be on the Avia when we sail in the summer, so we will most likely be booking ourselves in for more of that wonderful steak. So I've just mentioned the Epicurean. This was my favourite meal of the holiday. It was so special. It was a high fine dining experience. Now again, this was a cover charge, so you paid £30 per person, so a bit steeper. Given that there was 2 of us, that was a base charge of £60 on top of, you know, our food was already paid for, but it was worth it. It was just incredible. Again, drinks were not included, and I should caveat every restaurant, no drink is included. But you got several courses. It was just so delicious. I'm just in awe of my evening. So the restaurant itself was beautiful. It had kind of like a sea theme, I'd say. It was at the back of the ship. Now, worth noting, it was quite choppy that night, and you really did feel the movement of the ship, and being at the back, it was accentuated even further. So if you are someone that struggles with seasickness, the Epicurean may not be the one for you. Same with Glass House, that's right at the front of the ship, so, you know, just bear that one in mind. But it had this kind of sea vibe going on, and there were partitions throughout the restaurant that were kind of like glass waves, and they were like lit up with blue lighting. It was just stunning. And we had a table right by the window. Now it was dark by the time we were having dinner, so you couldn't see out, but we would have had a beautiful view had it been light. And you got to have several courses, and they were each so beautifully presented. My fiance, one of his was presented in like a wine glass. It was scallops, and it was all just so beautifully presented. He had a steak again at the Epicurean and said it was just as good as it was at the Glass House. And everything was just cooked to perfection. The service in that restaurant was exceptional. There was a bread service included as well, and they would come around throughout the meal, continually offering you more bread should you choose it, and you could choose which ones you went for. They had like a beetroot, they had a sourdough, they had a wholemeal, I think, and then there were 2 butters. So there was a I think it was an unsalted butter, and then the other one was a Marmite butter. Now I'm a hate it person when it comes to Marmite, but you know, for people who do like Marmite, what a really cool twist on a butter with a bit of salt in there as well. And then we could barely fit it in, but once you'd had all of your courses, they brought out for you this tier of like little chocolate truffles, and you could choose whichever ones you wanted. They had dark milk and white, and you could have as many as you wanted. We had one each and couldn't even finish that. And then tea comes with it. That is included in your service charge. It's not added on as an extra drinks wise. And it was just wonderful. And the portions, I find when you go to fancier restaurants, portions tend to be a bit smaller. I've never been so full. I rolled back to the hotel room after that meal. It was just divine, and a really, really special experience. And as I said, that would be where I would choose to go on a formal night in the future when I'm all dressed up. And it is actually one of the venues where you're not allowed to enter on a formal night unless you are in black tie. So again, it would just feel that bit more of an occasion. And then the final restaurant I'm going to talk to you about was on our last night, actually, that we went there. It was all a bit of a panic because we'd had a whole drama about whether we were going to make it back to the boat because the bus we were on had blown a tyre and we were stranded in the middle of Tenerife, but we made it back for our reservation. I should also add that the restaurant were exceptional in helping us with this, because we got back on the boat at 7:15 and our reservation was at 7:30, and, or was it 8:15 and our reservation was at 8:30? I can't remember. Either way, we had 15 minutes to get out of our beachwear, get ready and go to this really nice restaurant. And the restaurant were wonderful and pushed our reservation slot back for us, even though it was closing at 9. That was it. Our reservation was at 8:30. We got back at 8:15 and the restaurant was closing at 9, and they said, don't worry, you can come later, but just here are the menus, come knowing what you want to eat, and then we'll be able to just get it straight out to you. And I just thought that was such a wonderful touch, because it was out of our control what had happened, and we thought we'd lost our reservation, but they still made it happen for us. Now with Sindhu, again, items are priced individually. So your starters, they begin at about £5, a main starts at about £9, and a dessert is at about £4. Again, with this restaurant, we didn't actually have room for the desserts, but there were so many little extras that came in with the meals. So we actually, for our mains with this one, went for the trio. So we had a bit of everything. We had 3 different curries. So it was a bit more. I think it was around like £11 or £12 per person for the main, but it was just delicious. I think it's one of the nicest curries I have ever had. They brought out, before your courses came out, they brought out poppatom service for you. So you got to try like all the little different dips and stuff with the poppadoms. And then at the end, they brought out a trio of sweet. So there was a shortbread, there were candied nuts, and there was like a mango Turkish delight, and like a brittle as well. And so not a trio, a quadrat, what's the word I'm looking for? So even though we didn't have a pudding, we still had a little something sweet at the end of our meal as well. And I loved the restaurant as well. It was actually more in the centre. It was the most centrally based restaurant in the whole ship. So, well, we were also in port, which is why I wouldn't have felt the movement of the ship. But it's quite near the, I don't know the name of it, but the bar that has all the palm trees in it. So if you've been on the Azura, it's kind of in the middle of the ship there. And it's not that big, and there's quite a lot of booth dining, but it's separated with like string curtains and things like that, and it's just got a really nice ambience to it. It felt wonderful. As I said, I can't fault the service, given that they were so helpful and accommodating with our change to time. And again, I would 100% go back here. Curry is not my favourite food in the world. I very much enjoy it, but it's not my favourite. So I think that was why this was not my favourite meal of the trip, and the Epicurean took it for me. My fiance, on the other hand, adores an Indian, and this was his favourite restaurant. So I don't know what other ships the Sindhu is on, but if it's on the Avia, then 100% again, we will be returning to this restaurant. So all in all, out of the 4 that we went to, 3 I would highly recommend, and 3 I would 100% go back to. So I'd say not too bad. We enjoyed being able to balance it. We had 2 meals where we were in Freedom Dining, and then we did 1 meal out in Port in Madeira. So it was nice to have that kind of varied experience. I would say try, you know, be mindful of how much you eat before going in, because the portions were huge, and maybe even consider doing what we did and going for those later slots. I'm an early eater. I normally have my dinner at about 7 o'clock at the latest. So at the start of the trip, when for some of the restaurants we couldn't get a sitting until 9 o'clock, like the alarm bells were going off in my head. I thought, I'm gonna be starving, or I'll have gone so past my hunger at that point, I won't want to eat now. But actually really enjoyed having the later times, because it then just meant we had a bit more time to chill out during the day, get ready in the evening, meander down, things like that, and it was just really lovely. So let me know in the comments below, what has been your favourite dining experiences if you've ever done a cruise? And as I said, I'm sailing on the Avia in the summer this year. So if you've got any tips or recommendations on where we should eat, please do let me know, because I am incredibly excited to see what that ship has to offer. So as ever, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, see you later.